Pandora's box is about to open wide.
Welcome, everybody, yet again to Pandora's Box.
I like that.
If you've never tuned in Pandora's Box before, this is the show where we talk about a plethora of subjects every week. Sometimes it could be historical, could be sort of science-based, could just be really silly.
Yeah.
But either way, we try and keep it sort of fun and lighthearted and sort of bring some interesting information to you all. Do you guys know where Caledonia is? Does that mean anything to you?
Not Italy.
Yeah, I was going to say Italy for some reason.
No, it couldn't be further from Italy, really. No.
Wow.
Literally doesn't ring a bell to you at all. I expect you both have heard it at some point in your lives.
Yeah, probably.
You definitely would have done a lot, because
Is it South American?
my old man definitely would have talked about it in the past on shows that you would have sat in.
Caledonia.
Caledonia is basically was like the old name for Scotland.
Oh.
It wasn't like strictly like the border that we would know it today, because obviously that was sort of that was made later on as it is today. But yeah, the Romans used to call what is modern day Scotland Caledonia. I think we've talked about before about how the Romans invaded Britannia, and they were almost like, even though they were such a dominant force, the Romans were quite almost literally scared of the idea of invading Britain, because they had almost like legends saying that it was like this like terrifying place of like monsters, and they even thought that the English Channel was like guarded by like giant sea monsters and stuff like that. And obviously, from a lot of accounts, they were sort of testing the waters when they first arrived to Britannia, and obviously were very relieved to find out obviously that it wasn't quite as bad as they thought it was. But what I think is really intriguing is that there are some historical accounts that do actually almost like border on the supernatural.
Whoa.
Which and like literally written testimonials. So these are like pieces of scripture found by centurions that literally disappeared in modern day Scotland, and then were found by other Romans and taken back to Rome to report to the emperor.
That's so cool.
So I'm going to read you. I thought this was absolutely fascinating. This is literally a first-hand account, a piece. This was a scrap of papyrus that was found in Caledonia, that was written by centurion Titus Ursus of the 9th Legion. So he wrote, "This will probably be the last papyrus entry in my diary. Our legion was ambushed in the wild realm called Caledonian Forest, and was almost completely annihilated. Half of my first cohort is all that was left of the 9th Legion. We were pushed into the marshes, and we will probably die here, fighting bravely to the end in the name of Rome and our emperor. We were attacked by a demonic pack of barbaric Picts. They looked more like wild beasts than humans. Some of them were dressed in animal furs, painted with strange runic symbols. Others seemed to be two-legged beasts. They tore us apart as if we were made of paper. I saw our legatus and my brothers in arms being eaten alive. I will never forget their screams. The barbarians attacked us unnoticed, quickly and with wild fury, before disappearing into the thick fog. They would come at night. Our shields, swords and armour were no use here. The enemy we face seems to be the ancient wrath of some dark gods that we have awakened. We should have never invaded these lands. I can hear demonic howls at all times. They are coming. They are coming."
Oh my
Whoa,
God.
that's crazy.
And then it goes on to say that the scrap of papyrus written by centurion Titus Ursus was found in October 120 AD in the Caledonian Forest. It was then taken to Rome, where it was presented to the emperor, and then swiftly, and it was made a copy of, but then the original was burnt. And it says 2 years later, basically partly because of this incident and because of other incidents as well, 2 years later, Emperor Hadrian ordered the construction of the wall on the border of the land called Caledonia in North Britannia to keep these sort of people out, basically.
Whoa.
But I just think that's so crazy how almost you can imagine being almost like a Roman soldier in North Scotland, or just in there's just thick fog surrounding you. And these Pictish people were obviously almost so animalistic.
What does that mean? Pictish?
It's just like the type of people that lived
right,
there.
Right,
so if the Romans were the Romans, the Picts were the Picts.
Right,
it was just the
right.
people that lived in Scotland. We called them the Picts,
right.
The same way that the Vikings are the Vikings, the Saxons are the Saxons. So the Picts were almost just almost like a savage and animalistic people, and just covered in runes and these animal things, and just howling and by the sounds of his accounts, I don't know if almost he was just suffering from hysteria, or what, but he was saying that the men when they were attacked were like being like eaten alive and stuff like that. That's like a level of savagery, isn't it? Which is like crazy. That makes the Vikings look like toddlers. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it makes it seem that they really played on the fact, like, you know, how they would dress and like completely get like, adorned in like heads and it just looked crazy.
I remember when I read that like a couple of days ago, and I was like, man, that is actually like an amazing account.
That's so cool. That's like something out of a horror movie.
I was literally just about to say that's like something from a movie, isn't it? Do you know what that reminds me of a little bit? I expect you have, Drew. Have either of you seen that movie with Antonio Banderas called The 13th Warrior?
Yes.
And that's
so good.
That's actually based not I don't think the majority of the movie is, but the sort of the bare facts are actually also based on a historical account. And basically in the movie, it's quite hilarious really, because isn't Antonio Banderas, he's either Spanish or Mexican, isn't he? I think he's Spanish. Yeah. So he's like obviously not like a Middle Easterner. He's not an Arab. But I guess in the 90s, the logic was like, if you're a bit tanned, you can play an Arab.
Right.
Which is
kind of passes
to be fair, in the movie, like, you know what I mean? I guess it's like, you know, it's certainly not like as weird as if suddenly just like I played an Arab.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
yeah.
I love this bit in that movie. I think it's that movie where he's just sitting at the edge for ages and he's just like watching them all, and they're all like,
and he learns Viking.
Yeah, and he literally, and
well, he
the
learns
next
Old
minute,
Norse.
and he just replies to one, and then they're like, how do you know my language? He was like, I listened.
Yeah, he says it really intense. So he's like, I listened.
Yeah,
because he realised, he's like listening to them, and the whole thing is that in those days, like in the sort of the Arab world, they were like really amazing scholars and scientists and mathematicians and stuff. And obviously, sort of all the Vikings in those times, sort of none of them could read or write. You know, well, some of them, you know, they had like, you know, could do runes and stuff like that, but they couldn't like. If they say they went to say like England when they were invading, they could not read anything. Do you know what I mean? They could not read any of the scriptures or anything like that. Whereas obviously in the Arab world, they had really, really like amazing poetry and academia and stuff like that. So it's really interesting. It's almost like, and as I said, this is actually a true account. I can't remember. I think his name was like Ibn al-Fahad or something like that. But this was a true story as well. And it was like he basically encountered some Vikings that had travelled all the way down to, it might have been near Constantinople or something like that. And I can't remember if he asked them if he could join them or if he was like told to by one of his like superiors or something. But anyway, he joined them on this quest, on this voyage, and they called the Vikings in that region. They called them the Rus, and Rus meant Northman, and the Vikings essentially that settled in that region just north of sort of like the Arab world ended up being called Russians, which is what Russian people are today.
Whoa, that's crazy.
So obviously you see like Russian people, you know, and they look basically like Northern European, a lot of them, and that's because they almost like essentially are. If you go back far enough, and if you even think about things like names like Ivan and things like that, they're almost like bastardizations of name more like Ivor or stuff like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Whereas like Ivan's almost like the Russian version.
It's really good in the Viking series when
he travels to Russia essentially. Yeah. Kiev, I think, which is actually Ukraine, but yeah. And that was really interesting seeing the whole, because they brought in the whole Russian Viking thing, like in that. It was cool. Yeah, they'd obviously by that point. By that point, they'd almost like even developed their own sort of unique culture, and as sort of it shows in the Vikings program, they sort of converted to Christianity a lot earlier than the sort of the ones that stayed in Scandinavia or moved over to England and stuff like that. And they had like, you know, their own sort of specific types of armor and stuff like that, but. Yeah, we're essentially the same people by blood. But yeah, getting back to my point. So this Ibn al-Fahad or whatever, he joins the Vikings. And there's old Arab scriptures, which are like his accounts of basically, I don't know how long he spent with them. It was at least a few months. It might have been as much as like a year. But he basically spent time with these people. And it's really fascinating because you know how we've talked about before, like how the world would just be like, seem like such a bigger place back in those days. I think he'd never met these people before. And I remember, because I have read the accounts, he goes on about how, like, compared to like the Arabs at the time, they all seemed like such like tall. They all seemed so tall and broad and had like massive swords and everything. But there were like certain things about them that he thought that they were almost just like barbaric and gross. So you know, he was like, they would all just get like completely drunk every single night. And he was like saying like
passing around the spit thing as well.
Yeah, so
they spit in the bowl and wash their face.
In the morning,
spit in the bowl and wash their face. Like
that would happen in the morning. So in the morning they'd have like a big bowl that they would pass around, and they would all like wash their faces and stuff in the same.
That's crazy.
So like to an Arab at the time who was about as civilized as anybody in the modern world could have been, that was almost like just gross. Well, it would be to us. Do you know what I mean? It'd be gross to us, and it was a similar thing, and he couldn't believe it as well because obviously very much still today as well, like if you go to Saudi Arabia and stuff, I think like even like public displays of affection are still considered very taboo. I don't even think you can hold your missus' hand walking down the road, can you?
No, in certain places, no.
Yeah. Like that's how strict they take it, and very much we by comparison are almost like, even today, really like pretty hedonistic. I'm sure they would see us like that, but especially back in those days, the North Europeans would have been like completely hedonistic compared to them. And in his accounts, he says he cannot believe it because like at night there would be men like openly having sex with women like in public. Like it would be like they would start drinking ale and mead or stuff, and then they would literally like be in the corner of the tent like humping, and he would just be like, "How is this happening?" Like in the Arab
sounds
world,
like a party, man.
Yeah, but in the Arab world, that would just not be okay. Yeah. That would be like something, even in those days, that was like for the marital bed, like for the marital chamber, and like women were not allowed to have sex outside of marriage. That would be like a condemnable offense.
That's crazy.
But it's fascinating how obviously like like he just almost like as a fly on the wall, just became sort of part of this journey. As I said, you can read the real account. But in the movie, The 13th Warrior, obviously they sort of dramatise it, and it's really fascinating. So the guy, Ibn al-Falad, is played by Antonio Banderas, and they go to this place, and sort of linking back to what I was saying, why the Caledonian Forest incident reminds me of the movie, was because in that movie, it's almost like the Vikings are dealing with what they think are like these like supernatural beings that only attack them at night, and they all wear like bear heads, like bare furs, and they think they're like demons.
Sounds like a cool movie.
And they only
I want to watch it tonight.
I need to check it out.
It's an amazing movie. I would go as far to say as it's in like my top 10 movies of all
Whoa,
time. Yeah.
I need to check it out, man. I need to watch it.
It's intense, man. It's an intense movie. There's one of the actors in it as well as in Game of Thrones.
All right, cool.
But like a lot younger. The movie's not an old movie. It's probably like late 90s. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, it holds up still today.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? It's not like it's like, oh my God, it's like so old that some people would find it hard to sort of enjoy it. Because I know that some people are a bit sensitive for those sort of things. But it's an amazing movie. It's like these things they only attack when when the fog is thick and stuff like that, and they think they're demons and stuff. Like the majority of the movie, they think they're demons, and it reminds me very much of what's described in this account, which I just think is really fascinating. But yeah, so there's a bit of trivia for you, everyone. So that not only is that fascinating first-hand account from the centurion Titus, but also you found out that Scotland used to be called Caledonia. So that's just an interesting fact in itself, isn't it? And that's one of the reasons why they built Hadrian's Wall, was to keep out these almost like crazy Pictish people.
It's crazy to think the Vikings would have been scared of something else. Like, have either of you watched The Norseman? Or it might be The Northman, actually.
No, I haven't. No, I haven't.
It's really good. I think it's by Robert Eggers, the movie. I think he directed it.
Does he egg people?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Oh, the movie. Yeah, I have seen that. That's awesome, yeah.
That's the one where I always think they showcase like the bloodlust of like Viking people so well. Like you know the scene where they launch an attack on like a village and they all come in, they're all wearing like fox heads, or is it no, it's like wolf heads, I think. And they just do this like ritual before where everyone's like dancing in blood and everything just to get ready for this huge battle, and then they just go in and just like roll over people. It's not even like anyone had a chance against them. And I find that so crazy that they could have this like such intense bloodlust that no one could handle it. It was just straight up. Yeah, they would just roll through people. It's crazy.
Well, I think almost like the downside of becoming like civilized, if you want to call it a downside. Like obviously by the time because I said, as we've talked about before, the Vikings and the Saxons were almost like, you could almost essentially say they were like the same people originally. Like say in like 100 AD, they would have been. But by the time, obviously, the Anglo-Saxons had fully settled in the UK and established their kingdoms in modern-day England and stuff, like because of what we talked about, their links to Rome and everything like that, they'd become, they'd all become Christians, so they were God-fearing people. They would all go to church, and they'd established that sort of Christian way of life, and all the kings and the priests obviously would like read on a regular basis and stuff like that. But obviously, the more civilized you become, the more like these these like Viking people, they were so like in tune with the land, and obviously they were pagans still. So like, you know, for better or for worse, although it does seem barbaric, you know, certain festivals of theirs and that, you know, they would have like sacrifices, like human sacrifices as well as animal sacrifices. You know, very sort of in tune with the land, and you know, things like, you know, whether it was like almost like sex or violence were just very much more just like a normal part of everyday life, you know, to them. So yeah, I guess suddenly by the time they invaded the UK, it was a bit like, whoa. One thing I would be really interested to know, and it's almost like lost to history, is I know that by the time the Vikings sort of invaded, you know, the sort of like most of Scotland would have been Christian as well, but I think in sort of like I think I'm right in saying in like sort of like the remote parts of the Highlands and stuff, there probably would have been like some like illiterate sort of Scottish tribes still, and I reckon we know for 100% for sure that like Vikings would have landed there, but there's nowhere near as many written testimonials about it, because obviously a lot of the written testimonials from the Saxons were like from priests and stuff who obviously could read and write, but obviously if you can't read and write, you can't record your thing. So I bet there would be some fierce clashes between some of the Highlanders and the Scottish. Imagine landing on like the north coast of Scotland and I know it was almost 1,000 years later, but the people that the Vikings would have landed would have been like the descendants of the people that we were reading about in that account. The descendants of those Picts with like, I wonder how they dressed then, like this, you know, some of those like almost like more isolated Scottish Highland tribes, and what their attitudes towards the Vikings were like, because they would have been more different than the Vikings than the Saxons would have been, because we know from sort of, well, we still know what the Old English language was, and we know what the Old Norse language was, and we know that they're very similar. So we know that like you know, the Old Norse and the old sort of, you know, the Saxon people, they would have been able to like communicate to a bit, whereas say like I think the people say that are living in these remote Scottish tribes would have found it a lot more hard, you know, a lot more, because it's essentially obviously what we now know is almost like Gaelic. You know, that would have, if you didn't know Old English or Old Norse, which were like very related languages, if someone started talking to you in Gaelic, you wouldn't have a freaking clue what they were saying, would you? I mean, we don't. You know what I mean, if you see like a Gaelic sign, if you go to like Ireland or Scotland or the Isle of Man or something, and you see something in Gaelic, you don't have a clue what that means. No clue. It's like very alien language, isn't it? It's usually their words are very, very long, and it's like the way their words are set up are like very, very strange. There's like T's and G's all over the place and stuff like that, and it's like target garden again. It's crazy. We know so much about like the Vikings and all of the history of those people, but like the Picts, like that sounds so interesting. Like to go deep into that, like what their culture would have been like, what these. Even in that account of that, the Roman account, he was saying like it seemed like they were in tune with the old like old forgotten gods and forces. Oh, he says like he thought they'd angered some like dark old gods and brought this wrath upon them. Like, like to be completely steeped in all of that like culture and magic almost of that time. Like we don't know anything about those people really, because of all what you were saying then about the language and everything as well. It would be so detached from it all, so it'd be so interesting to like, I'm thinking like how much I enjoyed like the Viking series and that, if there was something that was like deeply in that, almost like the story of that Roman legion, and almost like imagine if it started with Centurion Titus, and he was like literally in Rome, and you're looking around, everyone's eating olives and like fresh fish out of the freaking Mediterranean Sea, and they're all talking about going to the theatre and the Colosseum and everything, and it's almost like life is good. And then he just gets his instructions, like you're going like to the far north of Britannia, to the lands of Caledonia, and you need to like, you know, fortify it or whatever, like settle it for the Roman people. And he's like, okay. I think you've never been there before. And then imagine how cool that story would be. Like you're traveling all the way up through Europe, and let's face it, you know, whichever way you went, you know, if you went up through France or whatever, you know, southern France is very much basically very, very similar to northern Italy, and then, you know, they've travelled all the way through, and then this almost like creepy voyage over the English Channel, and then suddenly you're in this alien land. And the further north you go, definitely a series in it, isn't there? Oh, so cool! And almost like the further north you get, the more almost like crazy and barbaric the people seem. And there's just like in the Mediterranean, they hardly even ever have things like fog. So imagine like you look around, it's almost like when you're in the Mediterranean, I always think at all times the sky's almost like a bit amber. Do you know what I mean? Like everything seems a bit amber, and the color scheme is very much like orange and sort of like auburn and yellows and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? Or very much in Italy anyway. In Greece, maybe a little more like whites and things like that, because there's got like lots of white sandy beaches and stuff. But I very much associate those sort of colours in my head. And then think they would have gotten to Britain and it would have been like dark and grey. And it would have been like dark, muddy, like grass and cold, and everything would have had, all their armour would have had like condensation on it, and they'd have been able to see their breath. And the further north you got, just the colder it would have gotten. And imagine just being like, imagine if you'd never experienced it before. As I said, you grew up in Rome, which was at the time probably the most civilized place in the world. And then you're in this place, and there's like no big settlements. There's just literally, you look around you, and like as anything further than 10 foot away, you just can't even see because it's that thick with fog. Mate, that'd be epic.
100%.
But creepy. I mean, like, it'd be epic for us to watch it as a series. But if you're one of those soldiers, you would be like, whoa.
Imagine if they did it as well, like from the perspective of the Romans, and had like a full storyline in that, but then also like equally the Picts, like but a main storyline of like one of the main characters of the Picts or something, and it just being like, so you actually get to see what like a depiction of that culture and stuff, like from their perspective as well. Because I always find it's generally like one-sided with a storyline sometimes, isn't it? But like, I can imagine how cool that would be if like it made you really invested in their story and also in the Romans, and then they have this huge battle.
Well, to be fair to the Picts, they weren't invading anybody.
No, exactly.
The Picts looking
imagine that. Imagine what it'd be like for them. It's steeped in all of their magic and that, to just be like, who are these like crazy people like that are like dressed
completely
up
different.
as like robots almost? They might look like.
Yeah, probably did. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Like all this like steel armor
dragons
and stuff. Yeah, and almost like the way that it'd probably seem almost like creepy, the way that they were all walking in formation and stuff, just like a modern day army. Do you know what I mean? They're not just like walking about like, you know, all of the Pictish like tribes. It would have been almost like, you know, a lot more like just barbaric and violent and tribal, and almost like hit and run and almost like stealthy and stuff like that. Whereas then, the Romans just almost like marching in formation and stuff, like with all with the same armor and everything. It would have seemed mental to them. They would probably thought like, it'd be interesting to know like what they made of it. Like, did they think that like, who did they think the Romans were? Because they obviously probably had interacted with other people in Britannia before. Do you know what I mean? People from the south, maybe, I don't know, maybe they almost had this unwritten rule after a while, like, look, you stay to your borders and we'll stay to ours, you know?
Did they know what boats were and stuff? Like, had they seen those kind of things?
I expect so. I don't know for sure. I think that they probably would have had like primitive boats. Do you know what I mean? But not like seafaring boats. That would be like my best guess. Like for the time, I don't think they would have had like seafaring boats, but they would have probably had like fishing boats. Do you know what I mean? Boats that you can go out into the middle of a lake and fish and stuff like that. You know, like throw some nets and things like that. Go crabbing.
I can picture like a really cool scene where like the Romans have just been like attacked by these people, and the fog's all come, and they've like half their battalion has been like torn apart, and then you just have this really cool moment where the guy that reading that you just read gets read out like word for word right before like the final stand against these like crazy people in the forest.
Yeah, that'd be mad.
That'd be a really cool scene.
It'd almost be like cool, even though it'd be really frustrating if they'd almost like did it was like a one-off series and then just ended off with like and then they just left it off with a cliffhanger. I've been like writing that, and then he just suddenly hears like "Arr!" or whatever, because he said he could hear like howls, like demonic howls and stuff, and then he just almost looks up and he's like, and then just cuts to black.
If there's any Prime or Netflix producers listening, make it happen.
We're just like, I'm selling this, man. Selling this.
I'm invested. I'm invested.
I also think it'd be mad to think about as well, like the whole Neanderthal thing as well, and the interaction between Neanderthal and human, and if the Neanderthals would actually ever band together, whether they were kind of like clever enough to like band together in like armies and stuff and have battles against humans.
Just to say, I think that Neanderthals were technically classed as like a type of human. I think they were. Interesting. I think so. It's like, you know, you'd have like certain things that would class as human, but I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying that. But then obviously we are like more specifically Homo erectus, and they were like Neanderthals. Yeah.
Would they have had like similar languages so they could have communicated with each other?
Well, we know that they did communicate to an extent. Obviously,
well, they definitely mated with each other.
Yeah,
so.
They say that say that like people in Northern Europe have as much as like 4% Neanderthal DNA. So that's like, we know for a fact that there would have been. I mean, 4% might not sound like much, but considering how long ago it was and how many people are in the world, really, it was probably actually like almost common. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like not not like super common.
It's like, what was that interaction like? Was it all? Was there any amicability? And did tribes get on with other? Like, did they live together or anything like that?
I don't think it would have been that much different than people today. Even though everybody alive today is Homo sapien, regardless of your skin color, where you live in the world. I think the same way that there are small genetic differences in humans today. And we know that like certain parts of the world, some people have like some Denisovan DNA, and things like that. I think that it wouldn't have really been that much different. I don't think that, because they wouldn't have been looking at it in a scientific way, like, I am a Homo sapien and you're a Neanderthal. I think they would have seen it like, there are all these animals in the world, and then there are these people that basically look like humans. They don't look 100% like us, but they're wearing clothes, they walk around on feet, they also have spears, they can also make fires, and they're also communicating. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, would it really be any different?
Was it not the humans, or like the Homo erectus that wiped out the Neanderthals?
You mean Homo sapiens?
Homo sapiens, sorry.
Homo erectus was the first hominid that stood upright. That's why it's called erectus, baby. Because it just means upright ape. That's what it means, like upright ape. Not to be confused with upright penis. It's sort of like a bit of a mystery why the Neanderthals died out.
Yeah.
A lot of people, the thing is, a lot of it is like speculation.
Yeah, Graham Hancock speculates that it was like through fighting with things, but only in his books and stuff.
I know there was this one crazy book, I can't remember who wrote it, and it's been pretty much dismissed. I think it was this guy who almost like, it was essentially like, I think how most sort of anthropologists almost like think about it is that the guy that wrote this book, I can't remember his name, almost essentially wrote like a fictional novel, but then almost like got so excited about his fictional novel, he almost tried to sell it as fact. And in his book, he wrote about the Neanderthals. He almost tried to like sell, this was like his hypothesis, but it basically has like very little scientific grounds, was that he tried to write it that the Neanderthals were actually were almost like monsters. In his book, he essentially says that Neanderthals were like monsters, and like imagine like a horror movie where like monsters are after you, and that's what it would have been like for Homo sapiens living around in Neanderthals. And he tried to write in his book that he thought that like Neanderthals ate us and stuff like that. And in his book, there's like brutal, like almost like horrible pictures that he drew of what he just perceived Neanderthals to look like, and it looks terrifying, man. I'm just gonna try and type it in for people that are like watching on YouTube and Spotify. I'm going to see if I can get up like a picture of a Neanderthal drawing. This is the F1 from the book, I think. So this one here. Yeah, so this is this guy's hypothesis. Like, look how it almost looks like something from a horror movie. So this is Neanderthals hunted, raped, and ate humans. And this is like what he did. But like, I think pretty much all other anthropologists say like, we pretty much know that Neanderthals didn't really look like that. Like, it, if you can think of like
They've
how
reconstructed faces, haven't they, and everything.
And obviously the famous thing that we've also showed before on Pandora's Box of the 1, 2, 3.
Yeah,
that was just legendary. That is. But I think this seems to be the guy. The Australian independent scholar Danny Vendramini has developed a Neanderthal predation theory, which argues that the evolution of modern humans, including our unique physiology, sexuality, and human nature, is the result of a reaction to this systemic long-term sexual predation and cannibalism by Eurasian Neanderthals.
That's a scary prospect, isn't it?
Yeah, but as I said, I think like most other like people were just almost like, it's almost, as I said, it's almost like he's written a fictional story, and he's like, no, it's real. But it's like, mate, where's the full evidence for this? I think he tried to base it on, I can't remember 100%, so I might even just be like, my brain might just be like just telling me that this is the case. I think he tried to say in one of his books or something, or he got really excited once because there was like the remains of like a Homo sapiens skull in like a Neanderthal sort of burial ground that looked like it had like scrapings on the inside of the skull that would look like the brains had been scooped out with a tool or something like that, which would almost like imply maybe that like they'd eaten the freaking Homo sapiens brains. But I can't remember if it turned out that was just, it turned out that it was like false or it was made up or what, but look, this is what they think more like a Neanderthal would look like. To me, I almost like to see it like they don't look too different. Like if he had a bigger beard, it would almost look like how the dwarves are portrayed in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
You know? Like they wouldn't have been quite as short as the dwarves in Lord of the Rings.
That looks pretty mental. The top left one. That looks pretty mad.
Yeah, I don't think they would have looked like that. That looks more like, I think that's more like how Homo erectus would have looked from what from sort of like what I've seen in the past. Because obviously Homo erectus, where it was the first upright ape, did look more primitive, like more ape-like. The funny thing is though, and I don't mean this as like an insult to anybody, you know, sometimes you might see somebody around and you think there's something about them just looks more like a monkey than, you know, like some people look like very almost like evolved and other people just look a bit like a monkey.
My dad when he sat down and bent over.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember our old really good friend Luke Palmer, shout out Luke Palmer, I've been chatting to him a bit recently actually because he's really into his rugby nowadays and obviously it was just the Rugby World Cup. But yeah, I remember when we were younger and when we were in primary school, one of the things I used to always say to him was I called him like little monkey or something like that, or like little monkey man or something
I've
like
got
that.
monkey vibes going for me, I reckon, like chimpish.
When you like eat sometimes and that, and you're in a bit of a daydream, yeah, but like
yeah. Or if I eat fruit, I'm literally
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I get anything with a pip, just put it all in my mouth.
Yeah,
Spit
yeah.
the pip out.
Yeah, I think like nowadays, like almost like what this article is implying, I think people mainly think that the Neanderthals were actually like very, very similar to us essentially. They actually had slightly larger brains than us. It doesn't mean that they were more intelligent than us, not necessarily.
Yeah.
But they actually had slightly larger brains than us, for a start. And yeah, they don't really think that they would have been that dissimilar. And like, yeah, you know, I'm sure it wouldn't have been a walk in the park. I'm sure if we went back in a time machine and it would have been extremely dangerous to walk up to a tribe of Neanderthals, but it would be extremely dangerous to walk up to a tribe of people in the Amazon forest because they would be thinking it as like, who the hell is this guy? He looks mental. We've never seen anything like him. And why the hell is he approaching us? And to a lot of these nomadic tribes, like we see it in the nomadic tribes of the Amazon, they basically shoot first and ask questions later.
Yeah.
There's lots of famous stories of like helicopters flying over the Amazon, and then they'll hear like dum dum on the bottom of the Amazon, and they'll look down and there'll be these indigenous people firing their arrows at them. It's like, bro, we ain't got any beef for you, man. But to them, I guess it's just like a fear thing. It's like, when you're living that much of a wild life, it's like, if you see something you don't understand, although it might sound almost like overly destructive to us, it's almost like it's not worth the risk that thing might kill you. So you should kill it first.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's as simple as that.
It's
as
a
simple
survival.
as that. There's that story, isn't there, about that like missionary, that Christian missionary.
Oh, yeah.
And all the like everybody warned him, like, mate, don't do this, do not do this. And he was like, mate, I'm going to go to the Amazon, I'm going to find these indigenous tribes, and I'm going to convert them all to Christianity, and that's going to be like, this is going to be like my life mission. Yeah, my mission in life. Like, and he got on this boat, and they even watched him row the boat out to the shore, and immediately these tribes came out in the forest. There was literally about 20 seconds of interaction. The guy started running, and then they all shot him with their arrows. And they literally, the people that told him not to do it were literally just watching him from about 50 feet away, just watching him just like dead on the shore. And we're like, mate. And it was like,
so
freaking told you not to do it.
Yeah.
You know? There's also that story we told before on the pod, and it was almost like a real mystery, but it was one of the Roosevelts. I can't remember his first name now.
Oh, yes.
Roosevelt's obviously very well known,
powerful
family in America. Yeah, that guy that.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. Yeah,
he's named Franklin. I don't know why that's just popping into my head. Franklin Roosevelt. I don't know why that's popping into my head, but
I don't think it was. Franklin Roosevelt was the 32nd US president. He was.
That's probably why.
He was the president of America during World War II.
Was it not Rockefeller?
It was Rockefeller.
Rockefeller.
You are right, mate.
Yeah.
You are so right. It was one of the Rockefellers who were one of the very, very sort of powerful American families, and he disappeared in the Amazon, and then it basically came to pass that he was eaten by a cannibalistic tribe of Amazonian people, and apparently I think they might have even found his like skeleton like hung up in this tribe, and it was like, oh man.
Wasn't there something about a child in that as well? Like he was gonna go and get one of the children or something, or
I can't remember.
It was weird. Yeah,
I can't remember.
I remember there was a weird bit about it. Anyway.
What was his name? I want to find out his name. Rockefeller Amazon disappearance. Yeah, Rockefeller disappeared in the Amazon. Where's his first name? Michael Rockefeller.
Michael Rockefeller.
Was Michael Rockefeller ever found? Went missing in South. Oh, it was Southeast Asia. Sorry, not the Amazon. Although there was an extensive search and quite a cult following in the cold case, not a single trace of him has been found.
So back in the day of like the Aztecs, obviously we were speaking about Vikings and stuff earlier. Would that have been like very tribalistic as well? Because I don't really know too much history on like Aztec.
Mate, they sacrificed people like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, the Aztecs. Oh man.
They would sacrifice people. I think some of their festivals they would sacrifice like over 1,000 people in a day.
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Apparently,
Those
like there would be
hearts out.
so much blood. There would just be blood like everywhere. It was like crazy.
You should read War God by Graham Hancock.
Yeah.
It's like his fictional series, but it's about the Spanish when they went over and just like the sacrifice and everything. It's a crazy story.
That must have been scary for the Spanish, man.
Yeah, and also Entangled as well. His book called Entangled is another fictional one, but it's all about the interaction between human and Neanderthals. Right?
Yeah,
it's like it was really cool.
Yeah, I mean the Spanish always were like, pretty much on the whole won all the encounters because the Spanish had guns, basically.
Yeah, they had the Aztecs had obsidian
weapons, glass essentially.
That was their everything that they had as a
savagely
weapon was made
sharp
out of obsidian.
Yeah, there was a lot of obsidian sort of like ore in sort of South America, so they would make these absolutely razor sharp, like terrifyingly sharp, like probably sharper than a razor blade weapons that would literally slice through flesh like you wouldn't believe. But obviously the Spanish, they came, they had like at the time what was probably like a lot of them would have had Toledo steel. Now, Toledo was literally a place in Spain. So they would have had Toledo steel. A lot of them, they had guns, they had big steel breastplates, which, let's face it, as sharp, like, it's funny, isn't it? Glass is very much like a rock paper scissors thing. Like, to flesh, probably slice your flesh better than a sharpened steel sword, but if you hit a steel breastplate with it,
don't smash.
it's probably not going to do much, is it? So I think the Spanish, the Spanish did do some savage things to the Aztecs as well. I mean, I know they say all is fair in love and war, don't they? But like they basically burnt alive like a lot of the freaking South Americans.
Whoa.
Yeah, they like burnt them.
That's
They
crazy.
would just like string them up and just burn them, man.
I wonder if there's like historical records of when the Spanish went over there from the Spanish people.
Oh yeah, loads.
Because that would be a really cool thing to like
Cortez.
find.
Yeah,
like,
look up Cortez. Yeah, he's like one of the most famous sort of Spaniards that went over there. And well, I think, was he the one that they found the City of Gold and stuff
That's
like that?
what he was looking for, wasn't it?
Was it like he was looking for? So, right. So in that case, there must have already been other Spaniards that came back to Spain and said that they'd seen it. The Lost City of El Dorado. That's what it was, isn't it? Is that right?
That's so cool.
Is that right? Lost City of El Dorado? I think that's right. Let me have a look.
See, my history on like this side of the like South American history and stuff like that, I've got no clue. I don't really know anything about it.
I don't either, man. To be honest, I don't. It's not like one of my strong points of history at all. I know like some bare facts. Do you know what I mean? Like basic stuff. I think it is. So El Dorado is commonly associated with the legend of the Gold City Kingdom or Empire, purportedly located somewhere in the Americas. Originally known as El Hombre Dorado, which means the Golden Man, or El Rey Dorado, the Golden King. It was a term used by the Spanish in the 16th century to describe a mystical tribal chief or king of the Muisca people, an indigenous people of the Altiplano Condaboyo Asense people of Colombia, who, as an initiation rite, covered himself with gold dust and then submerged in Lake Guatavita. Right, cool.
Crazy.
Yeah, so basically, I think, I'm not going to read out this whole article. I think basically, El Dorado was like the lost city of gold or something like that, and there were these stories about it. So the Spaniards kept going back and then trying to find it again, but then they've never found it. And to this day, it's like a mystery. It's like, is it out there? And they just haven't found it. It's like swallowed by the Amazon or what? Because a lot of people say, as we know, if say the Spanish people accidentally, like, because we know that entire like settlements were wiped out from like smallpox and stuff.
Yeah.
And the jungle in the Amazon, because it's what do you need to make things grow? We know, because we freaking live in Britain, which is also like this, but not even to the same level. You need it to be wet, and you need sunlight, right? And that's why Britain is so fertile, because we have just the right balance of sun and rain. But the Amazon, man, is sunny all the freaking time,
and
it's just
down.
damp. It's just freaking damp all the time. So everything grows like wildfire. So even if you went back to Spain and then came back again, say like 2 years have passed in that time, that would probably be all it needed to literally almost like swallow up a whole settlement. So a lot of people I think that there's literally been explorers, like Indiana Jones style explorers, over the last few hundred years, like European explorers, that have literally dedicated their lives to trying to find it. In obviously the hope that if you found it, you would be rich beyond imagination.
Yeah.
You know, it's that almost like crazy, lust for riches. Changing the story a little bit. This is another really. This is a fascinating tale, guys, and this is almost like it's a good thing to follow on from our Halloween episode last week as well. Have you guys ever heard of a man called Anton LaVey?
No.
Never heard of a man.
But not. I wouldn't know off the top of my head.
Anton LaVey founded the Satanic Church on the 30th of April 1966 in San Francisco, California. Anton LaVey, really freaking fascinating guy, man. So he was founded the Church of Satanism, as I just said. Obviously, Christians naturally think of him as like a very, very sketchy character. He is a sketchy character. He was a really strange guy, but he was also a very complicated and intriguing man. I did some research on him over the last couple of days. Really, really fascinating guy. He was actually a very talented man. He was a great musician. He was an actor. He did all sorts of things in his life. He also really sort of played up his character. So people were basically terrified of him in his lifetime. I'll get a picture of him for people that are watching on Spotify and YouTube. Anton LaVey. He looks almost like some stereotypical like villain from some like 80s fantasy. Anton LaVey. I feel
like I can already picture him without seeing what he looks like.
He's bold and he looks mental, basically.
Yeah,
look.
I can't believe I've never seen him before.
Anton LaVey. Yeah, look, here he is with his. So he used to.
Proper goatee, that, innit?
He had this big house and he had this organ in it, and he was a really good organ player. And apparently, at literally like all times of the day, he would just play his organ really loudly, but like deliberately like menacing music. So like people walking out past the house, say you're walking your dog late at night, you'd walk past this house and all you'd hear is like this creepy like organ music coming from his house. And apparently he used to like walk around like at nighttime and stuff in this like big black cape and things like that. But he was a really interesting character because he also apparently was like ridiculously law-abiding to the point where he like insisted at his satanic church that basically everybody followed the law and that nobody at any time did anything unlawful. And apparently he was like a really big supporter of like the police and stuff. So do you know what I mean? It's like people can be really complicated, man.
Yeah.
You'd think on the surface this guy would be like, like trying to like, slit the throats of the feds or something. Do you know what I mean? Like something crazy like that. But he was actually a ridiculously law-abiding citizen to the point where he like really looked down and frowned upon people that would get involved in like petty crime and stuff like that. But yeah, he and another thing that you wouldn't expect.
The snake he's got as well.
Yeah, I know, mad, isn't it? And look at this, like
he does look about as satanic as you could look.
Look at him at one of like the ceremonies and stuff here with this mad cape and his big freaking bling and all sorts. But also, you would not think this, would you? Especially with considering how many bands almost like dabble with occult sort of material, or mostly obviously for fun or because of like the gothic-y fun sort of element of it. But apparently he hated rock, metal, and music.
Really?
Like detested it. He liked like classical music and stuff. He thought that rock music and metal music. He apparently if he heard it, he'd be like, turn it off now. Like that's how much he hated it.
Whoa.
So he was like ridiculously law-abiding citizen. Even though like Black Sabbath and that were like known, like they weren't obviously actually Satanists. It was all a marketing thing by their record company. But all that music and stuff, like the actual song Black Sabbath. If you listen to Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath, it sounds very eerie. But apparently he hated all of that stuff. Very, very, very complicated character. But I think one of the most fascinating things about Anton LaVey is the story of his death. And this is one thing that spiritualists and Christians point to a lot. And it's actually a ridiculously eerie story. I think you'll definitely like this one, Drew, because it points into... I know you've researched things like this a lot in your life. I'll try and sort of tell a little bit of sort of bit more of the background of Anton LaVey, though, just for trivia's sake, before I tell you the story of his death. So
sounds like a really interesting guy.
Very intriguing guy. He also, how fascinating is this? So Anton LaVey founded the Church of Satan. He also played, and I didn't know this until the other day, he played the devil in Roman Polanski's 1968 film Rosemary's Baby.
Whoa.
Which is one of the movies I talked about last week that was supposedly was haunted. Obviously, I said one of the things I said to you about was Roman Polanski's wife. The year after was the lady that got savagely and brutally killed in the Charles Manson murders. Awful. But yeah, so how weird is that? He actually played Satan in Roman Polanski's 1968 film Rosemary's Baby. So he was an actor and a big enough actor that he was playing in like at the time. Yeah. That was probably like
big movie.
That would have been the biggest horror movie of the year.
Yeah.
Probably one of the biggest movies of the year.
Yeah.
Family members said LaVey. That was sort of talking about his death, so I won't talk about that yet. He founded the Church of Satan in 1966 and made national headlines the next year for performing a satanic wedding and then baptizing his daughter in the Church of Satan. The church claims more than 10,000 members scattered across the globe. His followers, which British newspaper The Sunday Times last year said included Sammy Davis Jr., which I thought was a hilarious fact. Sammy Davis Jr. would not expect him to be a Satanist. And Jane Mansfield. So if you don't know who Jane Mansfield was, she was almost considered almost like a, maybe not directly, maybe not necessarily to her, but she was considered almost like a rival of Marilyn Monroe, basically, in the day. So she was like, if Marilyn Monroe was like the biggest sort of blonde female sort of pin-up girls, if you want to call them that.
She was the biggest brunette.
No, she was also a blonde, but almost like the other big blonde of the day.
Right.
She obviously isn't as famous because of the whole controversy with the Kennedys and her death and everything like that, but she was very big in her day anyway, and lots of men like lusted after her. So he did all this crazy stuff in his life, but he says, his brand of Satanism was not about evil or animal and child sacrifices, so his family members say anyway. It was more about rational free thinking and a disdain for the hypocrisy he believed corrupted Christianity and other likewise religions.
Interesting.
He preached for living for the day instead of for an afterlife that nobody can prove exists. He did not believe in the devil, so to speak, and certainly not as an anthropomorphic being with horns and a tail, but rather as a Jungian archetype conjured up by mankind. Still, LaVey played the Satan image to the hilt. He often was seen walking in his neighborhood with his bald head gleaming, black cape flapping. For years, he kept a lion and tarantulas as pets. He would spend hours each day playing eerie organ music that could be heard on the sidewalk outside his home. His family home was a late 1800s Victorian house, hidden behind a chain link and barbed wire fence. It was painted black throughout with red ceilings, pentagrams on the walls, and satanic statuettes. Daggers and skulls hang on the walls next to a coffin with a plastic owl perched on top of it. Mr. LaVey was the author of 5 books, including The Satanic Bible, The Satanic Witch, and The Satanic Rituals, of which there are more than 1 million copies in print combined. Singapore even banned one, which was called The Devil's Notebook, in 1995, saying it promoted Satanism and it denigrated Christianity. Mr. LaVey's final book, Satan Speaks, was released posthumously. In recent years... in the last sort of years of his life, he released several musical recordings, such as Satan Takes a Holiday, which is an album that included such tunes as Honolulu Baby and Answer Me. He told his daughter before he died that he wanted his epitaph to be, "I only regretted the times that I was too nice." I think that's so funny. But we're going to have to take a break here, guys, because we're at the end of the first hour. But when I come back, I'm going to tell you guys the fascinating and creepy story of his death. You want to stick around for this because this is absolutely fascinating. Honestly, this is so good. So we listen to a bit of music now. And when we come back, I'll tell you the absolutely intriguing story of Anton LaVey's death.
You will open Pandora's box many times in your life. No, we probably really shouldn't open that box. Look, I've got one rule. Here.
Open your mind. Open your mind.
Welcome back to Pandora's Box, ladies and gentlemen. We hope you're having a good day out there, whatever you've been doing. And we've been talking about Anton LaVey, who founded the Church of Satanism in 1966. Do you reckon he waited until 1966 just so it was 66? Do you reckon he did?
That's quite a cool
I reckon
thing.
he did.
Yeah.
I reckon he did. But we're going to now talk about the fascinating incident of Anton LaVey's death. This is sort of an incident of much speculation. People sort of debate exactly what happened. But there are some facts that people do not dispute. What is clear is that when Anton LaVey was on his deathbed, he seemed to be absolutely terrified for one reason or another. People don't know, obviously, exactly what was going on in his head, but Anton LaVey, who was usually an extremely cool and collected, composed character, upon his deathbed seemed to be absolutely terrified. He seemed fearful and perhaps even regretful. This has led some to believe that he might have been seeking in his last hours some sort of repentance. There are some speculations of what was going on. Apparently, his final words as he died was, "Oh no, what have I done? What have I done?" And then he died. And he was like incoherent, and he was like babbling before his death, and terrified and like sweating and stuff. And lots of Christians and spiritualists think that basically as he was dying, he was seeing like demons and like going to hell essentially, and that he so finally like the weight of what he had dedicated his life to had hit home. Obviously, for any atheists out there, you're thinking, yeah, right, mate. Just to let everyone know, I'm not like necessarily religious. I'm an open-minded skeptic, so I just think I don't know really, which is I think the most intellectually honest thing that anybody can say, is because if you do say you know, then
you don't.
You don't really, do you? Let's face it. Right? But it's just speculation, isn't it? But
this reminds me. Do you remember a couple of weeks ago I said I was speaking about accidentally. Like it's selling your soul to the devil.
Yeah,
that's literally like what this is. Like like getting yourself.
It's a fascinating concept.
Yeah, like getting yourself.
He just deliberately did it, mate.
Yeah.
Well,
he still didn't know what he was getting into, you know.
Yeah, and he was saying that like even though he founded the Church of Satanism, it goes on to say that his family said that he didn't even believe that Satan was real. It was more like he was doing this thing almost like to rebel against the other religions, really. But yeah, apparently his last words were, "Oh no, what have I done? What have I done?" And he was absolutely terrified. A lot of like Christians like say like what was happening, because obviously in the Christian belief, they say 100% what was happening was, as he was dying, there would have been like demons dragging him to hell. And that would have been like the last thing he saw before he died. Yeah, absolutely crazy, isn't it? I mean, what you make of that obviously is completely up to you. But I think it's a fascinating story, isn't it? It's a fascinating story. One of the things I thought was absolutely mental on it, I read the article on it and there were comments on it, and somebody else left a comment, which I thought was a really interesting comment, which I'll also read out. And it's from somebody who was also a former Satanist, and they talked about they basically just left a very well written as well account of their experiences and their sort of belief on what happened to Anton LaVey. So I don't know the name of this person, and I wouldn't have said it anyway, but this person commented, "I have read all of Anton's books, and I used to be a Satanist. It took me getting caught in the rain in November in New York one year to realise the error of my ways. I took some acid and began tripping heavily. I lay down in bed feeling sick and started getting a fever from delirium. I was wide awake and my eyes were wide open, but I could swear that I was falling through this cavern where demons were flying down and trying to grab me and pull me into hell. I was terrified. The next morning I burned all of his books. I got down on my knees and begged God for forgiveness, for I was lost and I needed his guidance. I am forever thankful and blessed that he helped me find my way back, and I have not had any incidents since." And I just thought, that's just interesting, isn't it? Interesting stories, man.
It's interesting, like, but a lot of people would think they're cooler in situations than they are. So like people that are in this church may think that wouldn't play on them, but it's like subconsciously somehow their mind does play on them, that they're like, you shouldn't be doing this, you know? Like, that's quite cool, isn't it?
I think as well, like, even if you wanted to go for, like, more of a scientific route and say, like, you know, because they say, don't they, that your brain is, like, flooded, isn't it, with, like, different hormones and stuff before you die. And I think even one of the things that is flooded with is DMT. Isn't it? So, essentially, you would be suffering from almost, like, hallucinations, you know? And because DMT is just literally, it's released every night when you dream. That's, like, basically what makes you dream. So, if he had led the life he lived, even if there was some small shred of doubt in the back of his head that said, like, yeah, you know, at the end of the day, I don't really know. Yeah. What if there is a God? Yeah. And what if I am going to get, like, you know, I'm the guy that's founded the Church of Satan. If there's one guy that's going to hell, probably me. You know what I mean? Like, then that could have just basically been enough to make his last experiences of life, as his brain was getting flooded with these hormones, just to be awful. Which in itself is actually just, like, really sad, I think. Yeah. Imagine if, like, let's face it, sounds like an obvious and silly thing to say, but you're only going to die once. Well, actually, some people can be brought back to life, can't they? But, you know, let's face it, for most people, you're probably only going to die once. Realistically, you want it to be like a fairly relaxing transition. And don't I think
normally it is, isn't it? I was going to say this. Like, I think normally when people kind of pass over, they're more like content with, you know, just acceptance of the fact they are passing over. But so interesting that, like you say, that shred of doubt that was planted in this guy's mind, like, made it so he couldn't be.
I always remember Josh telling me, Bullwinkle's older brother, that when your grandfather died, so like Pauline's husband, your nan Pauline, that when he died, apparently everyone was like, I can't remember who was around him, but apparently they said that they were almost, even though it was like really sad, they were almost like happy for him in a way, because apparently like his like last moments he was just like smiling, and apparently I can't remember the details now, because I remember Josh told me this like at first when we went in primary school or something. It was a long time ago, man. But he's maybe like said something that like it implied that there was something magical and amazing going on. Like it was almost like I remember that the gist of the story, what Josh was telling me, was that it was almost like people were saying like he was going to heaven. Yeah. Like it was almost like he could see the gates of heaven and he was going to heaven, and it was almost like what a lovely thing for you as like as like a family member to think that like, oh wow, so comforting. That's such an amazing thing, because no, it wasn't him, was it? That was it was Josh's dad's dad. That was the priest or vicar, wasn't it? Yes. Yeah. Which is hilarious if you know Steve. Yeah. Like literally, like apple fell far from the tree on that one. But yeah, fascinating story, isn't it, about Anton LaVey? Anyway, fascinating story. So let us know, people. What do you think of the tale of Anton LaVey? Do you think that he really was being dragged to hell in the final moments of his life? Do you think that he was just experiencing some hallucinations due to the hormones that were flooding his brain? Or it might have been even just regret, some sort of regret in his life in general. Not even like a hormonal based one. You
never know how you're gonna react until something is actually happening. If it's something like as profound as dying, you know what I mean. You're obviously going through something in that moment, and it's like, who knows what you're gonna.
It must be like a mental moment
experience.
Yeah, I know. Like a lot of people say, don't they, that on their deathbed and stuff, that they feel. Well, obviously they don't say it afterwards, but they show sort of regret or wish they'd done more or wish they'd done something different or maybe.
See, that is something I really hope I don't feel when I die. I hope. I think that's quite a sad way to like end it off, by sitting there going, "Oh, I wish I'd have done this,"
Yeah, unfortunately, I think, like, without trying to sound like negative, I think it's hard almost in a way not to feel like that, because time is so limited, isn't it? And time is one of those things that, like, even if things seem like they're taking a long time at the time, afterwards it always seems like it's flown by, isn't it? And there's so much that you could do in your life, but only so much that you can do. And that's the frustration. That's the frustration, isn't it? That's where the frustration lies. It's like, what can I do with my life? And you're like, well, I could do this, I could do that, I could do that. And sometimes you almost get paralyzed by choice. Paralyzed by indecision.
Like when you're trying to
options.
pick a new movie in Netflix.
It's actually like that, but like with your life, isn't it? It's like, man, I've had like times where I've had almost like sporadic moments, and I'm like, shall I become a paleontologist? Shall I try and like, university just become a paleontologist? Just like, and then I can just spend all my time trying to dig up dinosaur bones, just like talking to loads of other essentially like dinosaur nerds about dinosaurs, and just going around in like museums and that. Like, that'd be sick. And also, like, I'd be well good at digging up dinosaur bones. Do you know what I mean? Like, compared to like some of the other maybe paleontologists. Like, that'd be great. I'd absolutely freaking love that. But then it's like, then you think, what if I do something else? And then you're like, what? I could just do this. I could do that. Blah 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 blah.
Too much choice.
Too much choice, my friend. Moving on to the next subject. This is another really cool one, and it also has a little eerie bit of folklore with it as well. Have you guys ever heard of Britain's Atlantis?
No.
Yeah, this is actually a really cool story, and also it ties into a little bit one of my favourite horror authors, H.P. Lovecraft as well. I don't know if H.P. Lovecraft based the Dunwich horror on his knowledge of this town and maybe his knowledge of some of the supernatural connotations with the town of Dunwich. But Dunwich town in the UK is considered Britain's Atlantis, and that's because a long time ago it was essentially swallowed by the sea. Whoa. It was a thriving settlement right on the edge of the east coast of the UK. And there were massive storms. I think it was the 1300s. I think it might have been even like several over the course of several hundred years, like one in 1200s, one in the 1300s, maybe even one in the 1400s. But eventually, it essentially like swallowed much of the town of Dunwich. But one of the things that's like crazy is it wasn't even just like a small settlement. At one time, it was considered one of the biggest settlements in the UK. Whoa. At one point, it was even on par with London. Whoa. And to this day, most people don't even know about it.
Yeah, no, I didn't know about
that. That's so crazy.
Yeah, it's on the Suffolk coast.
Oh, wow.
I can't believe that's not more like common knowledge.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. So I've got a little article here, so I'll read out a little bit more information. Dunwich is known as the Lost City of England. And this settlement certainly has a story to tell. Let's try and find some stuff. Hailed by some as Suffolk's answer to Atlantis, Dunwich was once a thriving medieval port on par with London as the capital of the Kingdom of East Anglia. So East Anglia was one of the Saxon sort of like places. So you would have had like Wessex, Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia. So that was the capital of East Anglia. It had over 3,000 residents recorded in 1086. 3,000 might not sound like a lot today, but 3,000 residents all living in the same place in 1086 in the UK would have been considered like a lot of people, like a hell of a lot of people. It says, however, the effects of storm surges and the resulting coastal erosion washed away much of the harbour buildings and land. Research has been completed with sonar devices to map out the underwater streets and buildings of Dunwich's past. Many people say that during storms, you can hear the bells of lost churches ringing from below the waves. That's one of the things I think is really interesting. And apparently that's like a real a real piece of folklore, and like lots of people have reported that happening. Whether it's hysteria or what, I don't know, but lots of people have reported walking along what nowadays is the beach of Dunwich. And it's mad, isn't it? Because you'd be like walking across the beach, but there'd literally be like a whole town in the sea.
Whoa.
And people report that like on like dark, stormy nights and stuff, they can hear the church bells ringing from under the water.
Whoa, that's so cool.
That's cool, isn't it? Almost like imagining these almost like undead people like living in, almost like a bit like Pirates of the Caribbean or something.
Yeah.
These like undead underwater zombies almost, just like ringing the bells in their church still or something. But fascinating place. It's sort of
does sound very Lovecraftian.
Yeah. There's also it's got a Dunwich museum. Which is cool. You can go to today, which will tell you all about sort of like the history of Dunwich, which is cool. Really fascinating place. Another really interesting thing about Dunwich, and they think this is to do with when one of the storms that eroded the town. There's also another sort of macabre tale, which is known as the Dark Heart of Dunwich, and this tells the tale of a local maiden with a broken heart who haunts the area around the beach, searching for her lost love, who was, sucked into the ocean during one of the storms when the town got swallowed.
Whoa.
A lot of people have like purported to see the ghost of this woman walking up and down the beach and stuff like that. So
if you went diving, could you still see all the old buildings?
Yeah. And as it said in this article that I read out as well, people have used like sonar and stuff and have like mapped out the place. And it's like, it's like a really big place. And there's still like a lot of like solid buildings underneath and stuff.
That's
like that.
Cool.
And really fascinating stuff, don't you? Do you think? I think I just like the fact that like this place at one time was as big as London and was considered one of the main capitals of the UK, and that we just today most people don't even know about it.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's even known as like Britain's Atlantis, and then you got the cool stories of like the ghosts and then the bells ringing on the stones. Like that's like imagine how cool that would be. Like again, talking about stuff that would make a good movie. You could make a banging movie about that story.
100%. I feel like everything we've talked about today has just been like a great movie concept.
Yeah, man. I mean, considering how many awful horror movies there are, and that's coming from someone that's a big fan of horror movies, like if you just basically said, right, I don't even need to write a horror movie. This is one that's written for me. I basically just have to direct it really well and get a good score done by a good musician and get some pretty decent actors to play it. Like you could make an amazing story out of that. Do you know what I mean? Whether it was a story of actually back in the day of it being swallowed, or like modern day, almost like a M.R. James style ghost story, where it'd be like this guy walking, his dog on the beach, and like he could hear some bells ringing, and he wondered what it was, and then he like saw a woman.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mate,
Different types.
it'd be great. Yeah, you could freaking milk that one.
Yeah.
You could milk that one.
I think as well, it makes me think with this whole swallowed by water thing, even the way the world has changed, like going back of all the lost history that we've talked about before that we don't know about, and how many cities there are just completely underwater. Like, when it was all one, Pangea, of one huge continent.
Supercontinent.
From then to now, like, do you know what I mean? There must have been so many changes. And
I can't remember if I said this on the pod recently, but did you guys hear that apparently... I think it's South Africa is like breaking into two.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you hear about that?
You told me this the other day. It's
Is
crazy.
it like the tectonic plates are like shifting?
Mate, so they think that basically it's like obviously these things take a long time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not like it's not like it would just crack and go and then like the scene will swap.
Yeah.
But they think that basically this is the early stages of South Africa breaking into two smaller subcontinents. Isn't that amazing?
That's what I mean. It's like the Earth is just always changing throughout. Like on a wider perspective, you know, it's just always it's going to be different.
Don't you think
it's so different?
Don't you think it seems almost like crazy to think that you could literally the land could just almost just like crack down the middle, and then it's like, oh, okay, so it's just like two places now rather than one.
Because it happens over such a long period of time. It's like you don't imagine it when you see like cities and you see things now. It's taken and it will be like that for so long. Changes aren't generally like super quick, are they? It's like and, apart from when, you know, the big massive extinction events and stuff, they're like instantaneous changes. But most things take, you know, thousands of years.
It's crazy to think that evolution like is always happening. Like it's so easy to forget that, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 100%, man. The world's always changing, but it's almost impossible for us to see because obviously time is so relative.
Yeah, and you think about it in your own life as well. Like from the moment you were born to now has just been a continuous like present moment. And there's no you know, you define it through, you know, you were this age, you were that age, this happened to you, that happened to you, that happened to you, but it's just a way of your brain categorizing it. Or it's just been this continuous event of growth. It's like crazy.
I think it's it's absolutely crazy, and I think a lot of people find this almost hard to get their heads around because, you know, it almost seems like really. But I think, you know, the way that you hear that like a mosquito lives for a day, and you think, man, that must be so savage for that mosquito. Like it must be awful to only live for a day. But obviously, the day life of that mosquito relative seems as long to the mosquito as our lifetime seems to us, because time is relative. So, although you think, how much of the world can a mosquito experience in a day? To the grand scale of like the universe, what can we experience in our lifetimes?
Yeah,
so I think what's the average lifetime or life expectancy for someone in the UK? Isn't it like something like 78 for a man and like 82 for a woman or something like that?
Right,
wow. Something like that. But like, I think in the grand scheme of the universe, that's like a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
Oh,
so that, like as you said, Drew, you know, what really can we experience? These things are happening on such a microscopic level, you know, but over the course of like in a million years, which to us seems like an unfathomable amount of time. But to, like, say, the world, if you wanted to imagine the world...
titans of the universe.
Yeah, if you wanted to imagine the world as, like, a living being, that's probably, like, a day to the world.
Yeah.
The same way that a mosquito is, like, a day to us. But, yeah, so I found this article here. So this was released in June 2023. There's a picture here as well of people that are watching on Spotify and YouTube of this big sort of crack that's opened up in Africa. It says, shifting tectonic plates have been splitting the continent since the East African Rift, a 35-mile-long crack in Ethiopia's desert, which emerged in 2005. The separation of the Somalian tectonic plate and the larger Nubian tectonic plate will effectively split the world's second-largest continent in two, a phenomenon that hasn't been observed in hundreds of millions of years, when South Africa and Africa were divided into different continents. The findings are based on a 2004 study on the separation of the Somalian tectonic plate and the larger Nubian tectonic plate. The study, which was published in the peer-reviewed scientific journal Earth and Planetary Science Letters, found that the plates separate a few millimeters per year. So think, just a few millimeters. So think about that. What's that, 1/5 of a centimeter? That's crazy, isn't it?
Getting a nice selfie with it.
Yeah, that guy's like, yeah, man, Africa's breaking in two. Woo! It's like getting a selfie with this one. This will get me some likes on Insta. What will Africa look like? Currently landlocked countries in Africa, such as Ethiopia, Uganda, and more, will see the introduction of a coastline, expanding possibilities for trade and production. Further, the split would lead to the emergence of a new ocean. Wow. Even that's cool.
Yeah.
Just a new ocean. The Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea will flood in over the Afar region and into the East African Rift Valley and become a new ocean. And that part of East Africa will become its own separate small continent. Ken MacDonald, a marine geophysicist and Professor Emeritus at the University of California, told Mashable.
I suppose.
I was going to say, do you reckon when that gets filled up with water in the sea kind of level,
that's exactly what I was going to say.
Really? Yeah, the levels will drop elsewhere and like more will come out of the water.
Yeah, I wonder if it would make it move quicker as well because of the force of the water. Like once the water gets in, I wonder if that would make it split like a lot faster than it is currently.
It's quite a funny concept, isn't it? Yeah, I like the idea of it. I mean, I don't know if it would be like this, but it's almost like you think of it, isn't it? Yeah, it's almost like pulling out like the plug in like a bath and just like seeing the water go down. It's like the moment
got to go somewhere
it tipped
else
over.
Yeah.
Imagine if just like everywhere else there was like in the world there was like an extra just like 10 feet of shoreline.
Yeah.
It's really weird, isn't it? But it says while the splitting of the African continent and the subsequent ocean that would arise holds an abundance of possibilities, the continent will not completely split for another 5 to 10 million years. So we are never going to see it. But that's crazy, isn't it?
Still cool.
Just a guy shaking his belly. Yeah, yeah, that's pretty funny. Isn't it?
I love the fact that like certain places you can go to are literally just big volcanoes, like the ash from volcanoes. Like is Tenerife one of those where a volcano erupted in Tenerife and that basically just created the land there?
Really?
I think so, because like the tectonic plate shifts and everything obviously creates the volcano, and then because of all the lava coming out and the ash and like it makes like it all dries and like makes the continent. Or not the continent, the country.
That is mad.
I'm pretty sure
I've never
that's
heard
the case.
that.
I could
maybe,
be wrong,
man.
but
Maybe.
and I like the fact that even then after then, like nature just takes its course, and then somehow like how does soil get there and stuff like that, and trees and grass.
I still find it mad that if you take a cup of soil from a fertile like woodland, and just put some rocks in the bottom of it, tip that soil on it, completely close the bottle. Just with the moisture that's in, I think you put a cup of water in there or something as well. But just like that, it will grow its own.
A terrarium.
They're so cool, and just to think like that, like you say, nature taking its course. It's just
the idea is that you could almost like make your own universe.
Yeah,
and that's what a lot of people say, don't they? Like some people even hypothesize, and it's like a crazy idea. But they think like, imagine if our universe was just a terrarium from this like unfathomably gigantic being that was like so big that the universe, even though the universe to us is so literally like unfathomably vast, infinitely vast, like it's just like a little glass like globe to like some being.
Like you say, time's relative, and so is size.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, man. Yeah, crazy. To like an atom. Obviously, like a flea is like a freaking blue whale. Well, like, probably even bigger than that. Like crazy. Mad stuff. What else have I got? Anything else good in my notes here for you guys? Oh yeah, I thought this was just like almost just like a funny fact. Did you know that to this day it's a mystery who did it, but somebody on the set of the movie Titanic laced the clam chowder on the set with PCP. Causing everyone to get like really ill on the set of Titanic.
What? Why did they do that?
No, well, nobody knows because nobody even knows who did it.
No,
an unknown assailant, if you want to call them that, laced the clam chowder on the set of Titanic with PCP, causing causing everybody that ate it to obviously just get really sick.
That's crazy.
It is mad, isn't it? Absolutely crazy.
I had a goat's kefir on the weekend.
Goat's kefir
made me really ill.
Really?
Yeah, it's called clucking goat, and it's like
the clucking goat.
It's the clucking goat, and it's a stupidly strong goat's kefir.
What is a kefir?
Kefir is like a
fermented milk.
Yeah, fermented milk.
Right.
So it's like
got loads of good gut bacteria.
Yeah,
that's the idea of why you would take it.
But with this one, it's like you're supposed to work up the dosage of it, so you have a very small amount, and then
did you
build
just
it up,
down it?
I had a cup like that, like of it, only because that was what was poured for me, and I didn't realise that till kind of after. But I was like, I drank it, but I got ill that night and stuff.
Well,
I was
belly?
fine at the time. Yeah, just got up in the middle of the night and just had to go down. I was like,
bleh. What, you literally threw up?
Yeah, threw up really bad. And
well, your body
it might not have been that. It might have been the food. But I was thinking, no one else was ill from the food that we ate, and we ate the same meal and stuff like that. So I was just it was almost like my gut was just a bit like, what is going on? Like rich food, like nice wine, goat's kefir. It's just a bit like too much.
I mean, I guess your system must have not reacted well to the influx of bacteria.
It almost just rejected it. It was like, what's all this? Go away.
There was like a little war going on between your like normal gut bacteria and the new gut bacteria.
I couldn't believe how strong it was to do like something like that though, because I really enjoyed it. I tasted it. I was like, this is real nice. It was like proper fizzy in that, like weird fizzy milk. But
I know that it is too bad to take in too much bacteria, even if it is good bacteria. So like I eat Greek yogurt every day, but I only have like a certain amount. I would just have like an infinite amount of Greek yogurt, and kefir's got even more good bacteria than Greek yogurt. But Greek yogurt's like a great source of good bacteria. That's why one of the reasons to take it. It's also a great source of protein and stuff like that, calcium, all sorts of things like that. But I know it is bad for you to have too much in. Like it can cause you a bad stomach, and I guess with Drew, the proof is in the pudding.
Definitely experienced that.
Yeah. That is savage, man.
Yeah, one of the first times for like years that I've actually like just thrown up out of like, normally it's because you've drunk too much or something, or like, but yeah, involuntary projectile vomiting.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Yeah, mental. Have you guys ever heard of parthenogenesis?
No.
You'll have probably heard of what it is.
Right.
Parthenogenesis is when an animal somehow reproduces even though it has not been fertilized by sperm.
Whoa.
Have you heard of that happening before?
No.
You've never heard of that before?
That's crazy.
So I think there's some species even that like solely
Jesus.
reproduce. Do you know what? It's really funny you say that because like a lot of people speculate that Jesus is an example of parthenogenesis.
Whoa.
But as far as science has documented, it's never happened to a human.
Right.
As far as it's documented, humans are incapable of parthenogenesis. But it has been documented in like reptiles and fish and certain other animals. It's a really interesting thing though, isn't it? Like, so there's literally been reptiles that have, say, like been held in captivity, like at a zoo or whatever, like a female species, never interacted with a male, and then will just boggle the minds of, you know, whoever's handling them because they will just suddenly get pregnant.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? And it's almost like this evolutionary thing that happens every now and again in certain species, almost like to ensure the survival of the species. Like,
it makes sense, doesn't it?
it does make sense, yeah, and like, but it seems almost like crazy. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, to us, you know, like reproduction seems like a very simple thing. Like, we all know it by this point in our lives. You know, like a female has an egg, a man has a sperm. The sperm literally like penetrates the egg, gets in it, and then that starts to form like an embryo.
I'm trying to even like figure out how it would work without that. Like, how does that even work?
Well, apparently, it makes in normal reproduction. Obviously, say like as a man, our genes, our DNA will mix with the female's DNA to create this almost essentially like a hybrid between you and your family and your missus and her family, right? But in parthenogenesis, it's doing the same thing essentially, but only with the genes of your own family. So because a lot of people have wondered, like, is parthenogenesis essentially like making a clone of you? It's not a clone. So like if say theoretically if a human could have a child through parthenogenesis, it wouldn't necessarily be anything more like you than if you had a kid with a woman.
Yeah. Because you can pass on genes that you don't have yourself, can't you?
Exactly. So it's the same thing. So the theory, that's why parthenogenesis wouldn't necessarily create like a perfect clone. So it's like, it would basically, you've got these ridiculous amount of like genomes, DNA, all this stuff in your history, going back from literally probably hundreds of millions, if not maybe even billions of ancestors, because you know how quickly and crazy your family tree can get out of anybody that's researched their ancestry will know what I mean. Like, at first it seems manageable, but once you get, even by the time you get to say like your great grandparents, I think each one of them would have had like, even just say like say you're born with as long as your grandparents haven't passed away, you've got 4 grandparents. Each one of them has 4 grandparents. Each one of them has 4 grandparents. You don't even have to go back very far, and before you know it, there's like thousands, and you're like, whoa, I can't even really keep track of this. You know, so that there's such a mishmash of DNA and genes that your body can pick, you can sort of almost like choose from to create your offspring, and it's almost like a pick and mix, isn't it? Almost a pick and mix of like DNA and stuff and genes. So yeah, it's almost like it will just go back and find these different genes and stuff like that, and it will form like a little creature. Yeah,
that's mental.
I have to say, I don't know. I'll look up some examples of animals that it's almost like a common thing that's happened.
Seahorses can do something weird,
I think
can't
they change their sex.
Yeah,
I was going to say about changing sex, and
that's crazy.
That's really weird, isn't it? I can't remember. There's a name for that as well, but where an animal can literally change their sex. It's like really strange. Animals that, I don't know, use parthenogenesis? Is that right? Parthenogenesis. Let's have a look. Most animals that procreate through parthenogenesis are small invertebrates, such as bees, wasps, ants, and aphids, which can alternate between sexual and asexual reproduction. That's crazy, isn't it? So yeah, parthenogenesis is the asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction obviously would be the more traditional, you know.
80 vertebrate species.
Yeah, parthenogenesis has also been observed in more than 80 vertebrate species, about half of which are fish or lizards. Isn't that crazy? Oh, we've got a nice little picture of a lizard here, everyone. Yeah, so let's find out a bit more about parthenogenesis, shall we? How some animals have virgin births, like the Virgin Mary. I just want to sort of like see like a list of animals. Oh, so there's a Komodo dragon, apparently named Flora. in England's Chester Zoo who achieved parthenogenesis, puzzling their zookeepers. Also a reticulated python named Thelma in Louisville Zoo, who had never even seen a male python, laid 6 eggs that developed into healthy young snakes.
Crazy.
Parthenogenesis comes from the 2 Greek roots that literally translate to virgin creation. How it works. Sexual reproduction involves 2 ingredients, an egg cell and a sperm cell. Each provides half the genetic information necessary to create a living organism. But in parthenogenesis, the body finds a unique way of filling in for the genes usually provided by the sperm. Ovaries produce eggs through a complex process called meiosis, where the cells replicate, reorganize, and separate. These eggs contain only half the mother's chromosomes, with 1 copy of each chromosome. These are called haploid cells. Cells that contain 2 chromosomal copies are called diploid cells. Do you know what? I'm just trying to think a minute. I think, is it like all... Oh, no, I suppose that's not the case. Is it? No, I think it is. Doesn't like basically all plants reproduce by parthenogenesis?
That's mitosis, I think, isn't it? Rather than meiosis.
Yes. I know. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm
trying to remember back to my science.
Yeah,
lessons.
I can think in biology, of like haploid cells and diploid cells and stuff like that, but I can't like piece together why I know it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I remember Georgie Linden looking
meiosis
over
and mitosis. Now you know your genes. I remember as well, because we were in the same science group, weren't we? Yeah. What the hell?
What even is that?
Nice little bit of music there for you, everyone. That was the
celebration of now you know your genes.
I actually quite like it. Let's just rock it. Let's rock it, everyone. That's so funny. Where's that coming from? The shark Lenny apparently also reproduced by parthenogenesis. Yeah, it's been observed in more than 80 vertebrate species. Obviously, just means basically animals with bones. Essentially. It's rare that complex vertebrates such as sharks, snakes, and large lizards rely on asexual reproduction, which is why Lenny and others initially stumped scientists. It's cool, isn't it? It's cool that it can happen.
Solo survival strategy.
Yeah.
I think it's quite interesting that animals just know how to reproduce. Do you know what I mean?
But it's a primal thing, isn't it? You don't think about it.
I suppose.
It's not even really any different in us.
I suppose it's like we get hungry. It's like
it's exactly the same.
Yeah, true. I suppose.
It's like
it's
we
exactly the same.
Know how it works, but we're just like
hunger. You don't think I need to eat so I don't die, and you don't think I want to mate with that nice looking lady
to recreate.
So I can make
the urge.
It's more like there's this thing inside you that tells you really want to do that.
Yeah.
So you do it. For what you perceive as your own gratification,
right?
And then
it's actually just nature's
and really,
way.
It's nature's like, got you. Now you've just.
It's interesting to see that in like animals and that though, even like dogs and that, like the way that a dog is raised by humans, but they have these complete tendencies that like pretty much all dogs have of sniffing butts and wagging tails.
Yeah. Especially considering isn't it dolphins the only other animal that have sex for fun?
Yeah, I think there are. I think there might be some other. I think rats do. I think I remember that. Let me have a look. Shall I? I'll quickly look it up just for you, Bullwinkle.
Thank you.
Animals
that have sex for pleasure.
Yeah, I know that there's a couple, but I think that dolphins are definitely the first one that would come to mind. That have sex for pleasure. Cool, everybody. You find out all sorts of interesting stuff on this show, don't you? Bonobos. Which are a type of ape. And other primates will have sex while pregnant or lactating, seemingly just for the joy of it, while short-nosed fruit bats engage in oral sex to prolong their bouts of intercourse. Oh, baby. Don't blame me. That is hilarious, mate. These little fruit bats just going down on each other. Sorry if that's a bit graphic, ladies and gentlemen. This is just biology. This is late night biology.
Late night biology. The stuff you don't learn in
it's really
school.
funny that then what I'm reading in brackets, it then says, there might be an evolutionary reason for this, but it could also just be for fun. Oh, that's great. So let's dive into this a little bit more, shall we, guys?
Let's dive right in.
Dive head first into the vulva. Sorry. I can't help myself.
Only 7.
7 animals that have sex for pleasure: dolphins, bonobos, lions, gorillas, macaques, chimps and male sea otters. But unfortunately, not female sea otters, which makes the life of a female otter very sad. Similarities between humans and dolphins aren't just limited to intelligence. These smart marine mammals have large clitorises, providing them with pleasurable sensation while mating. Even though the pelvis of a dolphin is entirely different from that of a person, their vulvas are surprisingly similar to the shape of humans. In addition, the clitoris of a dolphin has many features suggesting its function is to provide pleasure. Oh. In fact, bottlenose dolphins have an enveloped hood over the clitoris. This is late night sex ed, this, isn't it? As they mature, it becomes wrinkled, causing the tip of the vulva to become engorged with blood when sexually stimulated, otherwise known as a clit boner. Scientists were surprised by the size of the nerves in the dolphin's clitoris. Some measured more than 0.019 inches in length. In addition, dolphin vaginas are in an area where sexual stimulation is almost inevitable. That's so funny.
It's interesting that like nature doesn't make more animals have that, because you know, we are like designed to reproduce, aren't we? Our bodies are, and that's why we like sex, is because our bodies want us to like sex so that we do it more and then reproduce more. So it's interesting that like only a handful of animals also have that trait.
Do you reckon it's like a necessity thing as well? Like because of the way we've evolved, we need to seek that pleasure to be able to evolve more. But maybe that's just not a problem in certain animals. They just do it.
Yeah, like you said, they just do stuff.
So I don't know. It's weird, isn't it?
It's interesting.
But yeah, I would have thought it'd be a lot more animals.
Yeah.
You know, but only because that's our own perspective.
Yeah, true.
We're talking about how like basically like duck intercourse is like horrible.
Yeah.
Like savage.
And it's like his penis is like the
why is
it's
that?
like a key,
a
isn't
mallard's penis. It's like the size of its body, and it's in this real twisted shape.
Yeah.
So that like basically like sex for a female duck is like horrible.
Mustn't be too good for the male either. Like, you know, all
you'd
having to go around with that maze.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? But it was like, what a weird. It definitely seems like in some species it's unnecessarily difficult.
Yeah.
Like as you guys were saying, like you'd think it would make sense for it to be pleasurable, wouldn't you? You know. But then again, I'm sure a lot of ladies listening are thinking it's not even pleasurable for us. Mate. So I don't really know what you're chatting about. You know. Very interesting. A little bonobos. That's that, mate. Bonobos are interesting, aren't they?
Bonobos. I didn't even know that they were monkeys. They look like quite like chimps.
They're apes, not monkeys.
Are they? Oh,
yeah,
apes,
yeah.
They look quite chimpish.
Yeah. They are. I think they are by far most closely related to chimps. I think they're almost like a Noth branch of chimps. But I think bonobos are bigger. Like a bit bigger, you know?
That animal I sent you the other day, Calum, was crazy.
Oh, yeah. That like Mexican wolf. I think it's called a Mexican wolf.
Yeah. Ridiculous.
Yeah,
you said you've seen one in real life, didn't you?
Mate, yeah.
That's so cool.
I'm pretty sure they literally just have them at Exmoor Zoo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like, it's like this animal that looks like a mixture between like a fox and a wolf.
Oh, it's a crazy looking thing, yeah.
But apparently it's neither. Like it is its own genus.
Let me try
and it's the only member of that genus. Like the one that I sent you that was walking around, it looks like that looks like a demonic animal, I thought.
It does look almost unnerving. And yes, it's not this. I typed in Mexican wolf. It's not this animal. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe at the zoo it wasn't called a Mexican wolf. I could have sworn it said something. Or maybe it was like South American wolf or something. I don't know. Let's have a look. But yeah, they are crazy. They've got like mad long
Fox
legs.
Wolf. Yeah.
Mad American legs? Madly long legs and like almost like red fur. South American wolf. Let's have a look. Yes, I think it's this one. The maned wolf, I think.
Yes, I think that's one.
And they almost look a little bit unnerving for some reason. I think it's because their legs are like so long.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They look cool though, don't they?
Yeah.
Very cool.
They look really cool. Yeah, they have them in Exmoor Zoo, man. You could literally go on a nice little
look at like that. You know what I mean? Yeah.
It almost looks a bit like a werewolf. Do you know what I mean? Like you would imagine like if a werewolf was walking on all fours, that's how you think it would look, wouldn't you?
I love it. The hackles that make it look like even creepier. You know what I mean?
I love it that there's just new, like I've never seen this animal before.
Yeah.
You know?
No, nature's amazing, dude. I think animals are fascinating. Like just amazing things. Who doesn't love watching a good animal documentary?
Exactly.
Yeah. Look at that. Look how madly long that one's legs are. Crazy, isn't it? Yeah, so I'm sorry for people that listen just on the radio. We're looking at pictures of... They're called maned wolves.
Search it up.
Google maned wolf. You will see this crazy creature that's almost like a cross between a wolf and a fox, but with just ridiculously long legs. There's something about it which almost looks a little bit...
legs of a gazelle.
Yeah.
Literally.
Something about it which almost makes it look a little bit unnerving, but it's a cool animal nonetheless. A very cool animal.
That's the kind of pet I would want, I think. Something like that. Something that when people... If I was walking it, people would be like, that is a creepy animal to be walking around with.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe it's like a baby maned wolf. I don't know. Cool looking animal anyway.
That's a Chihuahua one.
Yeah, the Chihuahua version. I remember seeing a little clip the other day and it was comparing a Chihuahua's skull compared to a wolf's skull. And it just made me think, like, mate, things that we do, like some animals, mate, like you're just freaking messed up. Like, you know, like just made this weird, deformed little creature that like live their lives in pain, like all their lives in pain, and then until they just die, like just so that like people can just think they look cute or whatever.
It's the same with like pugs, isn't it? They like spend their whole life just in pain.
Yeah, can't breathe
Mate,
properly.
not a fan, I have to say.
No, I agree.
Not a fan.
I agree.
You know, I'm all like, you know, like I think, you know, in terms of like a nature sort of way, you know, if you eat for food, do you know what I mean? If you're like eating animals for food and stuff, that's like how we've evolved, and that's like a natural part of as omnivores, which we are like 100% omnivorous. Like, you know, that's just a fact. We are omnivores. Like we can eat vegetation and meat, and you know, I think that's like, you know, I think that's just like fair game. That's just part of nature. Now, obviously, you're getting into more complicated like topic when you're talking about like mass factory farming and stuff like that. There's obviously some issues there, but you know, I think, but when you're almost like taking an animal though, and almost like for your own joy, almost like breeding it into this weird, decrepit, like deformed entity, almost like for your own amusement. That's almost to me. That's almost like more like a form of torture.
Yeah,
you know,
it's messed up.
Like the really long dogs. They're
the sausage dogs.
The sausage dogs, but there's these other ones as well that are like bigger versions of
Right.
them. They've got real long, big, droopy ears and droopy eyes.
Northumberland dogs.
Yeah, really. Like,
No, I'm joking.
but whatever they are, those ones anyway, they're like a sausage dog, but like much bigger.
Yeah,
But
Northumberland.
they get these like things where the weight of because they're quite big.
Yeah.
Like the weight of their belly, like they go dipped in the middle, and then they get all these spinal injuries and everything, and it's just like savage. It's like that's not
Brutal,
a
mate.
proper dog, you know? Like
Hasn't evolved. Like
you know how we look back, like we were speaking about Roman stuff the other day, and we were looking back thinking it's crazy that, you know, they would have had gladiator battles and stuff like that, and now we look at that like that is messed up.
Yeah.
I wonder
that's one of them.
I wonder if this is going to be something that in like 1,000 years people look back at this and go,
Poor
like,
deformed dog.
that's awful, because it is messed up. Like literally creating our own animals that we think look cute, and they're just constantly in pain. That's like such an awful like concept.
It's
Isn't
weird
it?
that it's
There we
like it's weird that like we've only done it with wolves as well.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's no other animal where we've just like taken like a bear or taken like
yeah.
a lion and then just like bred it specifically to the point where it's not even classed as like a wolf or like a lion or a bear anymore. We've called it a different name, so like dog to wolf, and then we've just kept on breeding it until there's literally like hundreds of variants of this one species. Some of which are like Tibetan mastiffs, which are like massive and like brutal, and others that are literally like pugs and stuff like that. And it's like, mate, that's just actually almost like mental.
Yeah.
Imagine if we did that, almost like some eugenics program with bears.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's essentially what it is, isn't it? It's like eugenics.
Yeah.
It's breeding things almost like for a specific outcome, whether it's to make something bigger or smaller or to accentuate certain features or whatever it is. You know, that's what it is. It's eugenics, isn't it?
It's like playing God, isn't it?
It's weird, man.
Yeah,
It's
like
really weird.
pedigree breeding is only so far it can go. That there's already species where they say it's dangerous to just breed of that species because of the problems that they have and everything. Because there isn't enough like difference in the genes and that. And stuff.
Yeah.
It's like weird.
Well,
I don't
I mean,
know why it keeps happening so much still.
You look at my dog. Like my dog was just like a street dog,
you
like
say they're
Romanian
healthier.
rescue, and you can tell.
Yeah.
Like it
It's
looks
got
way
more
healthier.
genes,
Like,
Well, it's
that's
why-
the way it should be.
It's probably why, like, you know,
Mongrels.
it's probably
Yeah.
why, like, the Egyptians were like so freaking inbred, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's almost they're
Yeah.
inbred. It's essentially, it's
Yeah.
like they're inbred.
Yeah,
yeah.
So they're like deformed. Whereas, like, you know, you get that new DNA into them, and it's like they're going to be a healthier being.
Yeah, definitely.
Because that's like what it would be like in the wild, isn't it? It's like it's almost like by chance, almost like who would be mating, and they even say it, don't they? Like in some places, like in North America and stuff, they have like programs where, you know, it's actually beneficial for, say, hunters to take out, you know, like certain large bears and certain large old stags, so that they will basically not suffer from inbreeding in that local population, so that some young stag can have a chance, or young bears can have a chance to like grow up into maturity and then breed to make sure that it's like fresh gene pool, because otherwise the animals will start getting diseases and stuff like that. So it's weird.
Do you think it's possible? So you know how we're saying everyone like inherits different genes, and everyone, you know, your DNA makeup is so like vastly different to other people. But is there a chance that two peoples that could be born in completely different places could have the exact same DNA makeup, or not the exact same, but near enough that it would still be bad for them to reproduce together? Like almost like having inbred without actually being related to the person, just based on the DNA.
Well, I think that sometimes you see that in like small like populations, don't you? You know, so it's like, yeah, you don't necessarily have to be like strictly related, but if you lived in like a village, that's where that has that old trope, isn't there, about like, you know, a lot of like fairly isolated villages, even ones around the Quantocks, like Stagursey and Spax, and that. It's like a thing. It's like, oh, you're inbred if you're from there. It's because it's that thing, isn't it? It's like, well, before up until about like, you know what, like the 50s or something like that, cars wouldn't have been common. So it was very rare to leave town. So you're probably going to end up shacking up with somebody that lives in the same village as you. Yeah. But if you live in somebody's the same village as you, the chances are, if you go back a couple of generations, you might have a shared relative. So although you're not strictly related, your kid might be born with like, I don't know, at first it might just be like really big ears, or I don't know, just, do you know what I mean? Like just a bit odd looking, a ridiculously narrow chin. And then like after a while, it's straight up like deformity, you know? But anyway, we're going to have to leave it there on that note. We're going to leave it on the note of like, and after
straight
a while,
up deformity.
It's straight up deformity. So yeah, thanks ladies and gentlemen for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed all of the topics we talked about today, whether it's been Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satanism, the settlement of Dunwich, Britain's Atlantis, and the tale of Centurion Titus and his death at the hands of the Picts in the Caledonian Forest.
Great episode.
Well, we hope you guys think that too. Yeah. Cheers, guys. See you next week.